This recording we're going to talk about chapter 19, which is the savings, investment, and capital formation chapter. This chapter takes up on the y equals c plus I plus g equality. Starts with this. It says, we know from calculating output y, and output is also sometimes known as income. All right, we'll talk about why output is also called income in class. It can be decomposed as consumption, investment, and government spending. But what is investment in an economy? Well, how much firms are investing in things like factories and whatnot has to come from saving. Okay? I equals S. You can think of this as S is what you're putting in the stock market, how many shares you own of a company. And investment, I, is what the firm uses. Okay, so I equals S, savings equality, starting point. Now, once we have I equals S, we can also write Y equals C plus S plus G. Or in other words, S equals Y minus C minus G. What we want to do is break down this savings into two components, both public saving and private saving. To do that, we have to do a little trick. It's to add 0 to this equation. In other words, to add taxes minus taxes. So you can see this is clearly 0, so it's valid to add it and still maintain the equality. But once we do add that equation, what we can do is break down the equality into two parts. Y minus C minus T and T minus G. All right, so T comes from here, and negative T goes right here. So we can just rewrite the whole initial equality into these two parts. And what are these? Well, this is private saving, and this is public saving. Okay, public saving is income minus the consumption that people do minus the taxes they pay. So your saving, for instance, is your paycheck, Y, minus the taxes you pay, T, minus what you spend, C. So the blue equality here makes sense as private saving. What is public spending? Well, it's the difference between the taxes the government collects, right? Taxes are the income of the government, and G, how much the government spends. So this equality breaking down savings into private savings and public savings as a starting point. Okay, once we get that equality, what we need to think about is how do we model in a axis the savings and investment decision. So specifically, before we've started by saying there are prices and there are quantity. But what are we going to have here? Well, instead of price and quantity, we're going to have interest rates in dollars. Okay, interest rates in dollars. So when interest rates are high, how much investment should we expect there to be? Very little, right? So if interest rates are high, then it's expensive to borrow, so investment should be low. That's this area of the graph. What about when interest rates are low? When interest rates are low, then investment is going to be very high because it's cheap to borrow. So we're going to be in this area of the graph. So let's draw another X. Right? So together what we end up with is this investment inequality that's downward sloping. Now let's talk about savings. Okay, savings are going to be upward sloping for exactly the opposite reason. If the interest rate is low, you're not going to want to save a lot because you're getting a low return on your savings. But if interest rates are high, you're going to want to save a lot because then you get a high return on your savings. So what we have in this space is an upward sloping, downward sloping relationship. S, savings. So I'm writing savings so you don't get confused with supply. And I, investment. Now, how savings and investment are affected, that comes back to the equality that we had originally, which is savings equals savings private plus savings public. So in class, we'll talk about how changes in these two things affect this picture and specifically this equilibrium.